Joining me now is founder and proprietor of ReaganBaby.com, Megan Barth. Megan, good to see you.
It's a morning again in America, Liz. Good to see you.
It is. It's a good day to be a conservative today, that's for sure. Megan, let's start with the question of the day. And this is a good one. This is a good spot. This is a good way to start our show today. The question of the day: Donald J. Trump has been elected as the 45th President of the United States. He follows in the footsteps of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, Ronald Reagan. Megan, what does this mean for America?
This means great things for America. Number one, it means the repeal of Obamacare, which was a federal takeover of 1/6 of the U.S. economy, the largest tax increase on the middle class. That wasn't presented as a tax, but yet I kept asking, why are we hiring 16,000 IRS agents to implement Obamacare? And the American people, as they started getting their premiums, realized that the P word in this election was not what Donald Trump said. It was premiums. And as premiums were skyrocketing, the middle class, the working class of America was getting crushed. They knew, my fellow Americans knew, that big government was the enemy of their prosperity. And they chose another path that was not progressive, that gave us Obamacare. It wasn't progressive that we have a 1944 economy. And the American people rose up and took their country back.
Right. Over 59 million Americans, 59 million deplorables made their voices heard. Megan, how did he pull this off, though? When we looked at the polls, you and I just talked about this last week. The polls were within the margin of error or showing Hillary somewhat ahead. If you looked at the minority demographics, women, youth, Latinos, gay people, black people, any of the segments that Hillary Clinton wanted to set apart from the rest of average Americans, I suppose, whatever she chooses to do, how did it turn out so differently than what was predicted?
Because Donald Trump didn't forget about the forgotten man and women in this country, in the Rust Belt, that suffered greatly under NAFTA, Bill Clinton's signature policy. I had the opportunity to interview Eric Trump yesterday, and he told me a statistic that literally shocked me. I had called Pennsylvania for Trump weeks ago, and people thought I was crazy. But I trusted the spirit of the American people, the working men and women that built this country. What Eric Trump told me yesterday was 70,000 factories had closed since NAFTA was passed. These are the forgotten workers that the Democrats like to forget about and only come around every 4 years. When Hillary Clinton went into Philadelphia, she went with a lot of pomp and fanfare. She didn't go into the suburbs where the true working men and women reside, and rose up in record numbers. Pennsylvania, who would have thunk it? But then we look at Michigan, and we look at Wisconsin, and we look at Indiana. And these are the people that President Barack Obama, through his EPA, has completely collapsed the coal mining industry, as well as Bill Clinton called them those coal people. Well, those coal people saved this country.
Right, they certainly did. Quite literally, Hillary Clinton was geographically far removed from the struggles of the middle class, and it showed. It showed. People saw through her insincerity, saw through her record, her trying to paint her record to be different than it was. But Megan, let me ask you, this election was clearly a referendum. It was a referendum on, well, there's basically two schools of thought on this, and that's my question. Was it a referendum on Obama's terrible policies, or a referendum on Hillary Clinton's corruption?
I think it was both. I think it was a referendum on the two-party system, quite frankly. We had an outsider that came in, and we had plenty of interviews that were conducted on the ground of these everyday deplorable Americans on why did they vote for an outsider. And they basically said, I want to work more. I'm only working 30 hours a week because I got my hours cut because of Obamacare. And oh, by the way, my premiums went up because of Obamacare too. And so there was this whole swath of Americans that were just completely forgotten and were lied to by politicians, quite frankly, on both sides of the aisle. They considered the politicians the corrupt. And Hillary Clinton, even although the scandals that surround her and continue to surround her prove her corruption, Washington, D.C. is the place where really the swamp needs to be drained.
Right, and I think that's what's going to happen. Megan, let me ask you about this. Last night, after the election had been called for Donald Trump, everyone expected Hillary Clinton to come out and make, a semi-gracious, at least, concession speech, as is traditional for candidates that lose the presidency. She didn't do it. She didn't do it. She didn't emerge from her New York headquarters where they had a glass ceiling built. Instead, she sent John Podesta, her campaign chair, to tell the American people that they could go home, that there wasn't going to be any news tonight. Why didn't she concede last night immediately like that, only to call Donald Trump in a non-public way several minutes later?
Well, perhaps the propofol hadn't worn off. I really don't know. Hillary Clinton just disappears, and we don't know where she goes. She did it all month of August. Supposedly she had pneumonia. I don't know. It could have been a health issue, but Hillary's never been upfront or honest with the American public. She's never really taken the time to look them in the eye. She relied on the press corps in order to do her messaging for her and to reach out to middle-class Americans. It simply was not a good strategy. Condescension is never a good strategy.
No, it certainly isn't. Final question, Megan. All three, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, and then President Obama this morning, they all talked in their speeches about a divided America. We've seen this for ourselves. We don't need our political leaders to tell us that America is divided right now. We can look on our own Facebook pages, on Twitter. We can talk to our neighbors, our family, or our friends. There is some division, certainly, within the American people right now. President-elect Trump, I can't even get used to saying that at this point, he said last night in his acceptance speech that he would be a president for all America, for all Americans. What does he need to do to actually unify America so that this division does not continue for the next 4 years?
Well, I think the weight of big government and debt has created a lot of angst. That is always, government divides us. It necessarily doesn't unite us. The specific policies of Barack Obama that have really divided us and inflamed some of the American electorate can be seen in the checks cut by the DNC, whereby they were paying undercover operatives or just people off the street to bring violence to the Trump rallies. So this divided country, they also had Black Lives Matter at the White House, who I consider economic terrorists. They burned down cities. They caused riots in Baltimore and Ferguson in order to create social unrest. When you embrace lawlessness and use the DOJ as a weapon against your political enemies or agencies of the federal government against your political enemies, right, that certainly isn't a unifying action or message.
No, and just rolling some of those policies back might make the difference. Megan, thank you so much for being on the show. It's always great to talk to you, especially today. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, guys, we'd like to know your thoughts on the matter too. Tweet me at Liz_Wheeler. We'll be back in 1 minute.